We turn now to a story about kidnapping, murder, and a madcap scheme to grab control of a James Bond kind of flying machine. It's like something out of a spy novel with bizarre twists and turns and an ending you'll never see coming. It begins with a rocket pack strapped to your back. It lets you take off and fly like a bird. But as Chris Cuomo tells us, for everyone who got involved, it was a dangerous flight of fancy.
With an ear-splitting roar, a man strapped to a rocket shoots into the sky, arcing gracefully. A spectacular stunt. But the three friends you're about to meet saw much, much more. They saw a magical flying machine they could ride to a lifetime of fame and fortune. This is the story of how those lofty dreams of a rocket to riches came crashing down, leaving one friend dead, one in jail, and Brad Barker, the man at the center of our story, stuffed in this box, thinking he's about to be sunk in the ocean.
And I looked up at him and I said, Chris, I don't want to drown. I said, would you give me a minute to say a prayer and then put a bullet in my head? And I remember he looks at me and he goes, sure, no problem.
But wait a minute. We're getting ahead of ourselves. This strange story really begins with Brad Barker not in a box, but in a movie theater. Where did your fascination with the Rocketbelt come from?
Well, actually, the first time I remember seeing the Rocketbelt, I was a 9-year-old kid. It was in 1965. I was in a little theater in Carmel, Illinois, and I saw Thunderbolt.
007's daring escape was the first time most Americans saw the amazing Rocketbelt. But it was actually developed for the U.S. Army in the late 1950s as a way for soldiers to fly into battle.
It's an amazing machine. I mean, it puts out over 1,000 horsepower. Gases leaving the nozzles at 3 times the speed of sound. It's just an amazing sight.
A sight that's amazed presidents from John F. Kennedy to George W. Bush. The dream of free flight is so appealing that rocket packs appear in movies all the time. Here it is with Tom Cruise in Minority Report. But the field device has a serious flaw. The tanks only hold enough fuel for 21 seconds of airtime, so the Army grounded it, and the Rocketbelt's mission shifted to crowd pleasing. When Barker learned that each stunt earned $25,000, he loved the Rocketbelt more than ever. Now, when you all got into this back on day one, what was the dream?
Well, I mean, everybody wants to be wealthy, and that was pretty much it. Build the belt, go out and make a lot of money, and that was it.
But the Rocketbelt is highly complex, and Brad Barker is no rocket scientist. But he did have a friend with some cash to invest, Larry Stanley. How did Larry Stanley get involved in the partnership?
He was there to help with financing. He was a partner, equal partner in the belt.
Another friend, Joe Wright, owned this place, Car Audio Plus, and it becomes the launching pad for the project.
Basically, he supplied office space and shop space to build the thing, and for that I gave him 5% ownership.
Now, some might write off Barker and his pals as just a trio of astro nuts, but as you can see, they were making progress. And after spending 4 years and more than $100,000, in January 1995, the RB-2000 is ready for launch. Barker took me to the site of the RB-2000's maiden voyage, with pilot Bill Suter, who tested rocket belts for the Army, at the controls. So when you brought it out here, where would you test it?
Well, actually, it was a little further down the runway here, but Suter strapped the belt on, went out over the water, did a wide turn, and reached a speed of probably 70 miles an hour, an altitude of about 150 feet, and it was blowing a spray of water the whole way.
The test flight is a huge success. But before the business venture ever takes off, Brad Barker and Larry Stanley start feuding.
Larry discovered that Brad was stealing from him.
So says one of Larry Stanley's lawyers.
What Brad Barker was doing was going and dumbing up invoices for twice what the value was, and then presenting the invoice to Larry for him to pay.
We got into a fist fight. Stanley got in my face. I grabbed a 5-pound dead blow, lead-filled hammer off the table. I hit Stanley short blows twice to the back of the head.
Barker is convicted of assault, but the fight is only the beginning of a violent struggle for control of the RB-2000. What do you think these men saw in the Rocketbelt that the rest of us don't?
Fame and money.
Stanley, who put up most of the money, and his lawyer win a court order that says the RB2000 belongs to him. But when he arrives at Joe Wright's audio shop, the precious RB2000 has vanished into thin air.
Well, you know, the belt obviously was moved out of Car Audio Plus.
You moved.
Well, I'd really rather not get into that.
So with the rocket belt gone and Brad Barker less than cooperative, Stanley goes after the other partner, Joe Wright, to see if he knows where the RB2000 is.
Joe had indicated to me that he could find Barker. And Joe indicated that he was convinced that where Barker was, the belt was.
So Stanley, Wright, and their lawyers agree to meet, but Wright is a no-show.
He was supposed to have met us there, and he was terrified that Barker would find out.
Joe was so concerned about his safety at that time that he, as part of that deal, arranged for some cash out front from Stanley so that he could disappear.
And disappear he does, but not as he had planned. This is the home of Joe Wright, the marketing director for American Rocketbelt, Inc. Just days after he agreed to help Larry Stanley in a suit against Brad Barker, a corpse was found here. Now, this was his house. The body was so badly beaten, authorities needed dental records to identify it as Joe Wright. Now, would Joe Wright have had any reason to say, I'm scared of Brad Barker, I'm scared of what he might do to me?
No, none whatsoever.
But police take Barker in for questioning. He claims he has an alibi and witnesses.
The only thing I can say is we did contact every person that he gave us the name of. As you know, he has not been eliminated as a suspect.
Barker is interrogated for 3 days and released. But while he's out of custody, he's not out of trouble. Larry Stanley is still searching for the RB2000, and he hauls Barker back into court.
We received over a $10 million judgment.
But Barker can't pay, and the RB2000 is still missing. Why not just give him the belt?
Well, that
And be
first of all,
done with it.
First of all, that'd mean I'd had to have the belt. So, like I said, we can't go exactly there. But Larry Stanley, like I said, I owe the guy nothing. There's no way in hell I'd give the guy the belt.
About that time, out of the blue, Barker gets a call from a skydiving buddy, stuntman Chris Wenzel.
I hadn't spoken to Chris once in a long time, and said he had a movie job out in the desert.
So Barker leaves Texas for Hollywood, and this is where, as they say, the plot thickens. When he arrives at Chris Wenzel's house.
We walk in the house, and I sat down at the desk. And when I looked up, Chris Wenzel was in front of me, had a pistol pointed at my forehead. And as strange as it may sound, I smiled at the guy.
But it was hardly a laughing matter. It seemed like the saga was about to end.
Certainly did. And little did we know it's just the beginning.